doing ages 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20, and so forth. And so what that's designed to do is to say, how did God shape me with natural gifts, and how have those been revealed in my life? Where the life map exercise is, how has God shaped me by the events in my life? And then a lot of what this course is about, and of course you would add to that Strength Finders, Myers-Briggs, the DISC program, anything else that you've taken, understandings you've had coming into this. And so hopefully what's happening is you have greater clarity in community and self-discovery about how God has called you. Because most of us are at an age in which, and Bobby Clinton talks about this as the age of convergence in one of the books you're reading, where we've spent our youth exploring, looking at ideas, exploring a lot of different things, sometimes operating outside of our gifts. And so by now, we're in a life stage of convergence. And so every time we have something on our to start list, we should have 3 things on our to stop list. And so that instead of doing the things that are good, we do the things that are best and try to focus our work on our calling. And so, of course, that fits for those of you that are writing a dissertation. That fits because we always ask in the personal learning community, how do you see your calling and work different 7 years from now? Back up from that, what kind of a dissertation or capstone, if you're a master's, would you write for that to help that paper accomplish that? And back up from there, what courses would you take to help that capstone or dissertation to accomplish that? So what this particular exercise is doing is, as you discern your call, the more you have to write about it and to clarify it to others, the more it becomes clear not only to them, but also to yourself. And we are using a fundraising approach in the writing of this messaging document because and it's been developed by Rob Martin, and we use it in a more extensive way in our fundraising course. But he has looked at and looked at a variety of cultures and said, when you're trying to explain something, and in some case, something that you'd raise money for, or in this case, something you're trying to explain to your spouse, to your friends, somebody you might be recruiting to the organization that you lead, there's a certain way that just people in all cultures seem to hear a message or a calling in a way that they respond to it. And so there's a variety of ways, depending on your culture, to do it. But basically, it has these components. The first thing is the need. What is the problem? What is the challenge? What is it that is the need that your calling is addressing? And that's just how we're wired. And so what happens if you start talking about your vision, and you say, my vision is to be able to help people that are hungry, but people haven't yet understood the specific context and the specific place where you are helping them, they're going to tune out. They don't understand it. They'll go, well, that sounds great, but they haven't gotten emotionally involved in the need. And until they get emotionally involved and even intellectually involved in what is wrong, it's hard for them to understand what it is that your vision is to accomplish would be different. Then the second thing, and so that's where you see in Rob Martin's questions, is what is God calling? What need is God, or what problem is God calling you to? What is God calling you to do about it? And so then just because it's a need doesn't mean it's a calling. There's needs all over the world. And if we took every single need that we saw and felt compassion toward and said, it's my job to fix that, we would be very grandiose. God has gifted us in particular ways and have given us experiences so that we actually have certain needs jump out to us in vivid color, while other needs are kind of dulled in the background in gray. And then as those needs jump out in vivid color, they connect to our giftedness, our experiences, what we are wired to do. And then we get a vision in giving our gifts on what we're going to do to address that. And then we come up with a plan that's even more specific. In order for this vision to change this need, and at the end of my work, as God so blesses, this many people would be less hungry, this many people would be educated, then we come up with strategies of how to do that. But most people don't know how to understand our strategy until we tell first, how would we measure if we've done it? And we've looked at this in different cultures. And so the order of trying to explain your calling so a way that people understands it understand it is need, vision. How would you measure it? What would it look like? And as concrete as possible. And again, Western cultures want numbers and charts. That's not necessarily true in honor shame cultures or power fear cultures, but they do want to know what would it look like differently. And then once those three things are said, then what is my strategy? What am I going to do? And then after that, sometimes they want to know what's your track record. I've heard your need, your vision, what it would look like, and how you would measure it if you were going to accomplish it, what strategy you would use. But now I'm not sure. And then in a fundraising environment, you would add a budget. What kind of money would I need to make that happen? But then they say, well, what's your track record? Why have you been able to do that? But the exercise today, we're looking at helping you to articulate the logic of need, vision, what would it look like when it's done, and then begin the process of what strategy are you called to. So let me stop at that point. Any questions as you're thinking back on the messaging document before we jump in? Because that's what we're going to be evaluating this morning, is how well you've articulated need in a logical format, vision, measurements, and then strategy. And most of us, when we first do this, we mix them all up. And so that's a lot of what we'll be doing here, is separating them back out just to help you for clarity. So let me stop at this point. Questions about that before we jump into it? Does that seem consistent with what you understood you were doing today? So
you're unmuted.
Well, I can say, Dr. Smith, is that I'm looking forward to this discussion. I really am. I like the approach about the problem, the need, what are we doing about the calling, and then of course how we measure it. Because I think we've all, I certainly have jumbled, and sometimes you jump from 1 to 3. You skip 2, sometimes you start at 3, and then you go back to 1. So I think I've been guilty of doing this in many areas, because I suppose over time with experience and life, you kind of skip certain you kind of circumvent the process, and that's not necessarily good. But I'm looking forward to the discussion, because I'm at a crossroads, having done so many things all over the place, and you think you're gifted in this area. Maybe I'm gifted, but is it my calling? So we'll see.
And Jacqueline, a lot of times when you're talking when you're talking to close friends, you don't have to arrange it this way, because they love you and they're going to listen to you anyway. At the end, they may say, "Bless you, that was great." They may not understand exactly what you told them, but they love you and you look like you're excited by it. However, even for close friends that you've been sharing hours and hours and days and years about your vision and calling, when sometimes people have said they've gone through this exercise and gone back to a spouse or somebody that has been part of their life for decades and explained it this way, they'll go, "Oh, okay, now that makes sense." And you're like going, "I've told you about this 20 times over 2 decades. This is the first time you've done that." And so even they had the patience to listen to it. Sometimes it clarifies. But sometimes you're recruiting a new board member. You are trying to explain it to somebody that's going to need to be a part of your calling, your fundraising, and they don't always give you that amount of time. Sometimes they're going to decide in a relatively short amount of time, are you making sense or not? And then if you're not, they want you out of their office, or they want to try to get their coffee drunk fast and get out of there. Versus if you're making sense, now you're drawn into the story. And so sometimes in our fundraising class, we take it down to even a smaller nugget, because we realize we may only have what we call the elevator speech time, a minute to minute and a half. And we've got to capture their attention in a minute and a half. Then they go, oh, they relax. I want to hear more about that. Then you go back over it in a more detail. But having clarity in your calling is good for you to focus your own work. Good for even people that love you and will listen to you however long you want to talk, but also when you're trying to explain it to perhaps new people that you're trying to engage. So that's the thought behind this. So anybody else, before we jump in, did that make sense of what the exercise is about? Well, who would, Vaughn, I'm going to let you, I have them all here. And so which one do you want to go first, Vaughn? I'll let you kind of pick and I'll share. I can share because I'll mark it up. Just tell me who you want to go first. And I've taken Florine's and took it out of the format and put it in a Microsoft Word format. It makes it easier. Okay, not hearing. Jackie, since you went first, I will go ahead and just do yours first. So actually, Jackie, I think yours was the one that was in the message format. Yep, that's it. Okay, so what I'm going to do, and so, which is fine. It's very easy to put it into this format. So all I did, Jackie, is I just took it and pasted it in Microsoft Word. Okay. So Jackie, make your mark consultants, and your vision, and I know y'all have framed this because it's clearly worded, is we aim to be recognized as a leading organization with passion, people, and resources to help organizations and individuals realize their purpose. And it's good. And one of the things just to think about it, and we're not even into the white paper yet. This was that opening just to help us to coach it. It is, it's good. It's partly is the vision is to be an organization that has the right kind of people, and it's good. Realize their purpose, but why would you want them to realize their purpose? There's usually something in the vision, and you'll see it later in your white paper. Is they realize their purpose as an organization, as an individual, to do something. And you know, within BG, you hear a lot about joy at work. And in order for an organization to have joy at work, the people in the organization have to understand the purpose of the organization goes beyond just profit maximization or making a product or providing a service. That product or service does something that makes a difference in the world in a way that the people in the organization go, wow, I get to be a part of a movement that if I wasn't a part of, I would not feel as significant. And so one thing, even in your vision, you would say, you know, what are we asking? Is there a niche to that purpose? And so in the book, Joy at Work, that Dennis Bakke wrote, chapter 7, he does a great job, probably one of the best chapters I've ever read on organizational purpose. And what he's doing is kind of saying that the stakeholder view, first of all, profit maximization is not the purpose of an organization, should not be. But even the stakeholder view of what an organization's purpose is probably not viable either. And it's a great way. So one thing just to clarify, you're helping them understand their purpose, but you're probably shaping it in some way, helping them understand how their purpose as an organization is changing the world, and helping individuals clarify their purpose in a way that they seem significant and make a difference in the world. And so as you articulate your vision, you might want to add a little bit to just say, what is my unique niche? Because you're probably not interested in working with organizations that say, my purpose is profit maximization. You're going to help shape that, frame that, give them a new passion toward a purpose that goes beyond that. And even for people, you're probably not going to just help them say, well, my purpose is just to survive. You really are helping to shape that so that they really get a sense of significance. They're part of a bigger movement in God's kingdom. So that's a thought. Does that make sense, Jackie?
Yes, thank you. Yes, very much so.
And then mission and purpose, great job. And so the mission is the statement of the purpose and the primary means. And that's how usually missions are. You've got that. And so the purpose is, our purpose is to assist.
Am I the only one getting a deterioration in sound, or you're all having it? Are you hearing clearly?
Yvonne, that was cutting out for me, so I did not hear that.
All right, I'm seeing no system resource may affect your audio quality. It may be on my side. I just wanted to know if you were all hearing clearly. Jackie?
I'm not hearing you, Yvonne. I hear Brad. I hear Brad very well, but not you.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
But jump in if somebody's not hearing. Raise your hand. There's got a little hand button. You wave. So we'll try to figure that out and slow down. So your purpose at Make Your Mark Consultants is to assist clients in meeting and exceeding their full potential by helping them make systematic changes in areas they've identified as important. We will help young men and women realize, and including young men and women. One of the things and again, just as a clarity, this is your team. We haven't even gotten the white paper yet. Sometimes it helps to think in the framework so that I would understand your mission relatively quickly. Is what's our purpose? Our purpose, you've stated very clearly, we're here to help people recognize their full potential and make systematic changes. We focus specifically on young men and women. And when you get to, we are here to make individuals, organizations, their products and services stand out from the rest, you're moving into advertising language, which is fine, but it's not normally part of a mission statement. We strive to keep it simple, informative, and useful throughout the partnership. Now you're clarifying kind of uniqueness or distinctive, but it's in more of marketing language, and so it may not be exactly in the right place. Is there a way that you can say at a clarity, and then you can add a little sizzle to it later, our purpose is to help organizations and individuals reach their full potential, period. We will do this by helping them make systematic changes, da-da-da-da-da. If you had 3 primary means that you would use to accomplish a purpose. So remember, purpose is mission, is a purpose statement, and then primary means. What would be the 3 primary means you would use to help people and organizations accomplish their purpose? What would those be? Jackie, I'm sorry, that phone is ringing, so I can't turn it off. It's about to stop.
Sorry, you were saying you're asking me to respond?
3 primary means. If the purpose of your consulting organization is to help organizations and people reach their potential, period, we will do this by means number 1, approach number 1, means number 2, means number 3. You already have in here means when it says helping organizations make systematic changes. But a mission statement generally has purpose and then primary means. What would be 2 other primary means you would use for your organization to help people and organizations reach their potential?
Training and development and consultation. Those are 2 basic.
Do you do
things
coaching, executive coaching?
Yes, coaching. Yeah.
And so it would help me to understand in your mission statement, and you add sizzle to it afterwards. So you kind of get down to the bare bones and then back it back out. That so in bare bones, your mission.
I know what I was doing, but I don't really know that I would be given an option to.
I'm going to try to mute something. I'm not hearing somebody that's trying to talk. Okay. But your primary means is to help individuals and organizations realize their potential and help them understand their purpose. You will do that by consulting about systematic changes in the organization, training of individuals and people in an organization, coaching of leaders and individuals, and that's and then that helps me understand the mission of your organization. Then you add sizzle on top of that. Sizzle meaning, like you say, help services stay out, keep the rest, keep it simple, informative, useful. So that just helps to think through maybe what's the bare bones of your mission statement, and then adding a sizzle back on top of the bare bones.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yep. So our values, driven by dedicated to total client satisfaction, so customer orientation, deliver excellent spirit, quality, and value in everything we do. So that helps me just get inside the picture of your organization. So what's my need? Okay, what is God showing me? Okay, so this is where you're capturing all of us. If this is stated well, which it is, we're like inside of, okay, I want to read the rest of it because you've captured it. So what you've said is over the years, you've seen that, that people, they require leadership and focus. When you have this phrase here, dissecting of genetic and environmental issues, you notice by saying that, you probably have lost most of us in that phrase. And the reason it's not bad, it's just none of us know exactly what that means. And so it's something that means a lot outside of your organization, but it's such a connection of words that we're not sure. So where typically it might be saying that they do require leadership, focus, and just understand all the factors that determine outcome. You're going more specific in this, that you're saying genetic. I'm assuming those are both individual DNA, but also cultural DNA in an organization, and the context that's affecting the organization and the purpose. It's just and maybe you can keep it, but it's just it kind of jumps out as, I've got to stop and slow down and analyze that phrase. And you really don't want me to stop and slow down, analyze something this early in the process. Later in your brochures and in your team, you can come back to this. But it doesn't allow the flow of the reading and the understanding to keep going. And so, and you keep it, now you're saying my context is Jamaica. Okay, of course. And you're trying to explain why there is low growth and high crime rate. but in some ways you've kind of jumped a little bit. You're giving us something about the context. And so that another way of saying this is specifically the need is greater in Jamaica for these organizations and individuals to have focus, leadership, and to understand the personal and cultural factors and external factors. So what you're really doing here is you're really giving us, and that one of the uniquenesses of this need is the environmental issues in Jamaica create a need that should draw me in as the leader. And then that need comes from. So now you've through Make Your Mark, we've trained over this many Jamaican. Now you're jumping into your history, which is okay, but I haven't maybe gotten the need yet. History usually comes later. And so I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Here you're talking about your unique gifts. Well, again, I'm not quite into the need yet. And so I'm hearing, okay, well, you've done a lot of things and you've got unique gifts to do that, but I'm not emotionally or totally strategically connected to the need. And so all that is thinking about our flow, need, vision, how are we going to measure it? What are we going to do? What's my track record? What we're going to do has a budget in there if you're raising money. So what's happened is you're moving a little quickly to your track record and who you are, and before you've gotten us really hooked on understanding the need. One of the needs here is that you've gotten back to the need here that managers in the middle are important to an organization's success and failure, but they're not necessarily trained well. Especially, let's back it back out. If you were going to restate this and pull out your qualifications and experience and put that at the end, okay, and try to get me more into the need. First of all, you would say that individuals and organizations need focus, they need leadership, and they need to understand what they have as their gifts and their culture and the challenges they're facing in their environment. The area that I work in particularly is difficult because it's Jamaica. And Jamaica has some real severe issues in terms of educational challenges, crime challenges, and lack of family values. In order for these things to be overcome, we need a strong group of middle managers. And yet, those middle managers are not understanding a lot of the key emotional intelligence, the key strategies, the key teamwork that they need in order to accomplish this. These are needs that are keeping our nation, our organizations, and our individuals from accomplishing what is needed to turn around our culture. So that's kind of focusing a little bit on the need and staying there long enough for somebody to go, wow, okay, yeah, that is a problem. And wow, the problem of middle managers getting it is very important, but a middle manager can't get it unless they understand their personal calling, their personal values, their personal purpose. Then they have passion to be good at and emotional intelligence to be good at changing the organization in the midst of all these challenges and giving it leadership focus, understanding of its culture and its environment. So that's what you're trying to do, is just stay focused on need for this first paragraph. Does that make sense?
Yep. Thank
All
you.
it is organizing. That's just helping the listener get it. So
Yes, yeah.
and then again, so now you're also focusing on another need, and this is good to move to another paragraph about young men. Okay, and that a lot of the problem in crime is by young men that don't understand their purpose and they're not connected with them. I think this one is almost totally focused on need, and I think you've got it there. So now what I'm hearing is, okay, you're focused on the need in organizations, but your unique focus too is on the problem with young men in Jamaica and how much that are done by crime. Sometimes it does help to put in, not too much, and this is more for a little bit of a Western audience, to put in our crime is carried out by men up to age 29. If that could be restated in that, 80% of crimes in Jamaica are carried out by young men between the ages of 14 and 29. What that does is it immediately captures number, that's fine, and then you can always footnote it down at the bottom. But if you do, when you're making a statement like that, that's such a huge need, not long, but a short statement helps people go, wow, that is really true. That's a problem. Right? And you're also talking here about brokenness in family. Right? And that's good. That's really key. And so that, again, the problem of crime is coming from a breakdown in family. That's creating a challenge for organizations, and all that's coming together. And so, again, I think it's well focused on need. I'm not yet seeing, because I'm not into the next section, how lack of focus in organizations, issues of crime, especially among young men, and I do see how family breakdown does connect to that. But you're trying to basically say, by the time I get down to the vision, organizations need leadership, focus, and understanding of the environment and the context. Our unique context is Jamaica, where we have high crime, often created by young men who do not understand their purpose and calling, often created by family breakdown and educational breakdown. And so you've given me a challenge, and I go, okay, wow, that is a problem. What am I supposed to do about it? What has God called about it? And you're being honest. I'm not sure exactly. You understand the need, but you're saying I'm still working on it, and that's okay. That's what this claims. What you've done here is you've given us a lot that's helpful to us in ASM 702. It won't be necessarily what you would put in your final eyes, you troubleshoot, you influence, trainer, speaker, curator, planner, resource mobilizer, launcher, negotiator, strategist, and closer. Okay, that's a lot. Okay, so notice what's about to happen here. You understand a lot of things, problems in organizations, problems in culture, and you've got a lot of gifts. You could do a whole lot of things and have done a whole lot of things. And so a lot of what we're trying to do in this class is help you to say, what is it that you're most focused on? And this is a messaging document in the brainstorming phase. So to not have it all put down and focus is just very fine. At some point, you will want to probably prioritize this list of gifts. And the priority of the list of gifts will be what helps you focus your calling, if that makes sense.
Very much so.
And so, and I think you probably, if you took 5 minutes right now, you would probably be able to prioritize that list. And but then that's going to help inform your strategy, your calling. Mm. And then you've moved well to the next section. And again, I just appreciate, we're in process. This is an in-process thing. So you suspect, that's good. You don't want to say I'm certain of something unless you are. And most of us say we're certain before we are. So I appreciate your honesty. But that's part of this class, is to just explore with each other. That something's going to happen different. And so one of it is the growth in the economy. That's a great thing. But can you feel like, now later, if enough consultancy and a large enough consultancy organization to say, we could actually impact the nation of Jamaica. And so I love that. I love that vision. That's very exciting. But it may be more of a vision than it is of actual way to measure the outcome. And or maybe it is. I don't know enough about the company and how big it is to do that. But that'd be exciting. Personal organization predicting would take us out of negative growth. Wow, wouldn't that be cool? Domestic violence would have decreased by up to 20%, down from 60%. That's a pretty 60%. Wow, that's a lot. That's up in the needs section. That's huge. These are big vision dreams. Probably if I was a donor, I would say this goes into your wish list, the dream list. But you say measure is that helps me to get excited about investing in you because you're seeing something big and you're going to not stop until you go as far as you can. But if it's connected to a strategy, you would say in the next 3 years, we hope that we could see, 15 organizations do this. We hope that we could see, we could train 100 people, but out of those 100 people, that we'd see 20 of them do this and another 20 do this. Again, that comes later. I wouldn't even focus on that a lot in this exercise. But later, if you're building a business plan, raising money, recruiting people, you would get a little bit closer. But I like the way it's written now. I was excited. And so that gives us a really good picture of your bigger vision. But recognizes this is a bigger vision than measuring results. And if you notice, this exercise really didn't ask you to go into specific, so you don't need to go any further than this. But it's well done and excited. So I'm excited by it. But I love the big picture vision. And it's interesting. We've had, John Keene, I'm assuming, who was one of our students years ago. And his vision was by getting people that there would be a comeback to understanding what we agreed to in 1963 as a nation and call us back to what I would arguably say is the most godly national mission statement I've seen in the world. That's like, wow, what a big vision. And then it's like, given that, what I'm going to do is print this brochure, have this soccer rally, and have this many people come. But it helped me to get excited by his program because I saw the bigger. And this is great what you have here. Later, you'll develop a strategy and a budget.
Yes,
make sense?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Exciting stuff. So Yvonne or anybody else, any thoughts or questions or advice or excitements or encouragements you would give to Jackie before we move to somebody else? Another student, you're welcome to jump in. Yep, that's helpful. So what I may do is I'm just going to call it somebody. Melissa, with any thoughts you have about what Jackie's written here? Encouragement.
I'm really impressed. I feel like in a way you're making me question everything that I put on paper because I don't have near the clarity that you do. I know we've talked in a good discussion group about this too as well, and all that you have articulated for real. Yeah,
it's exciting, isn't it? It's you'd want to work in her consulting company.
Yeah.
It's like
and I agree with Dr. Brad that it's just as an editor, that's what I do. I'm for a living. The content is there. Kudos.
Well, thank you, Melissa. And some of the coaching today is just to help think through the logic of this and all of that. So very good. So great job, Jackie. I'm really excited to keep hearing more.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Melissa.
Dr. Brad, could I just also let Jacqueline know that I think it feels like she already knows her calling and it's just all there. It's like what you said. It's just perhaps getting down to just a few keywords and focus in that. because she's just so talented in all the things that she does.
So yes and no, Felicia. It's a great point. I'm going to argue back just a little bit. She does know her calling, but she's so multi-talented and exposed to and experienced in so many different things. If Satan was going to keep her from being most dangerous to Satan's work, what he would do is get her out of focus. And so because she's got so many gifts and so many things she's excited by, and so she does know the breadth of her calling, but what we're asking in this course to do is to help her focus on the most important things. And so, and this is sometimes more difficult for people that have had a lot of experience, a lot of passion, they feel need and they want to change it, and they've got a lot of gifts. That makes it sometimes hard for them to focus their calling. And this is why we have a community. And so, the encouragement, if I was in her personal learning community or a friend, is go, wow, you could do that. That would be exciting. But don't do that, because that would take away from the other thing that is really exciting and really you need to do. And so that's a really good thing. It's not your best thing. And I think that's the clarity that she will be exploring in her calling. It's more than just wording. It's also just clarity. She's a good writer, but just really getting down to the nugget of what's going to be what God has specifically called her to as much as possible. And then exploring that. And God takes us on rabbit trails. That's how we learn about depending on him. But just more and more clarity. That makes sense. But you're right. I agree with that. So,
But I just add, and for Jacqueline, for a lot of us, we tend to need to prioritize.
amen.
And it's a must. It's a must. Because without that, but the hopeful thing is that once we've zeroed in on one thing, and we're sure we understand how we know our work is done on that one thing, then we free ourselves up to move to the other stuff. That ties in with what I was saying earlier, that you may have several visions and dreams, but we sometimes have to zero in intensely on one. And then, having achieved that one, we can move on to the others.
Makes sense. So let's go. I'm going to go next to Felicia, if that's okay. Yvonne, anytime you want to say no, go this place, you tell me. But you're the boss. I'm following you, but I'm going to do Felicia next, if that's all right.
Yes, I think it's Saturday morning, or Saturday night, Saturday evening.
Let's catch her before she goes to sleep.
Right.
So, because it's later, she's already had most of her day. Where some of us are starting. So, Felicia, the name of the organization is Sovereign Asian Pacific, and so your vision is to see a future of holistic leaderpreneurs and communities. And one of the things that, and again, that's a vision. That's actually probably more of a slogan than a vision, and that's okay, because the leaderpreneurs, I understand that's probably leaders who are acting like entrepreneurs, starting new things, building new things, taking risks. But anytime it's a new word, that is really designed to create a slogan that people go, yeah, that's the group that does that. A vision is going to have a little more detail in it. And so often people write a vision and then they create a visionary slogan that kind of becomes their moniker they use in marketing. And there's nothing wrong with that. This is just the early stage of the white paper before we can get into it. And so, I don't really know exactly what envision a future holistic leaderpreneurs and communities means, but it sounds interesting. It serves what a slogan does. It kind of gets me in the general picture, and that's okay. At some point, you might want to clarify your vision in a little more detail. I see it later in the white paper, but just to understand, it serves this purpose, lets me know. And so we believe and imagine hundreds and thousands and millions of ordinary people empowered by leadership, entrepreneurs, and organizational efficiency to live lovelier, happier, healthier, wealthy, and wiser lives as a result of holistic leadership, entrepreneurship, impacting their communities. In that, you've actually stated your vision, okay? Now I understand it more, but I don't understand your mission, okay? And so a mission is what's my purpose and what's my primary means. And so let's say that we move what you just wrote there under mission up under vision, because it's a clear vision statement. And you said, we exist in order to do something, and that is to build leaders who are risk takers and create new organizations and new solutions. We do that by coaching, training, organizing young people, writing books, whatever. Then I have a little bit of understanding of what the mission is. Does that kind of make sense of the location of the logic for this paper? So think about your mission as what's my purpose and what's the primary means I'm going to do to accomplish that. Okay? And that just needs to be thought through and written down. And I know you know it, it's just putting it in the right, but as somebody listening, it would help me to have that kind of a logic so it's clear and I kind of know, where that's going. So if that makes sense. Let's see. And then what's the need that your calling addresses? I believe my calling is to address the need for economic justice. That sounds exciting, but I have no idea what that really means. Okay, and again, it's a paper. The whole point of this is your first draft to keep working on it. And so let's keep going down. God is showing me to work my calling by improving organizational efficiency and systems and equipping businesses and organizational leaders and entrepreneurs to bridge the economic gaps and disparities, especially in developing nations. Okay. What's the problem or need? And again, you're just going through so Rob has asked the question in his document 4 different ways. You're answering 4 different ways, although they were kind of more, he's asking the same questions in 4 different ways because different cultures respond to different questions. I see the challenge to be mismanagement and stewardship of resources, and also in Christian businesses. And the resulting outcome, now we're moving to outcomes, and it's jumping around just a bit, is ever increasing economic disparity, the outcome of the problem, okay, of course. What's happened here is you've answered the questions, but it just needs to be tighter, and I don't have enough, and partly because I don't know the mission clearly. I'm not sure exactly what it is you're going to be doing. I do understand you've got a passion for economic justice, and your scope is in Asia, and it looks like it's a scope that's going to be in developing nations, in particular in Asia, but it's just not clear. I'm having to do a little bit of detective work to figure that out inside of these sentences, and that's what you don't want. You don't want me to have to do detective work, and so it's in there. It's just having to pull it out. I also understand that you have an economic vision, so it's bigger than just changing organizations. It's bigger than one nation, and it seems to be focused on where those economic injustices are the greatest in Asia, which is in developing nations. And your unique distinctive is you're going to work with entrepreneurs who are building new companies, new non-NGOs, new solutions. But I had to kind of do some detective work to figure that out. Does that make sense? And so let's say that you did not want me to do detective work, and I gave you 3 sentences to tell me what is the need. What would you say the need is? You only have 3 sentences. And I'm putting you on the spot here, but just, we're playing around. So what would you say?
Well, generally, I feel like the need down here, it's really for me to bridge the gap of, I guess I'm using the same thing again, to bridge the gap of between the rich and the poor. Mm-hmm. And that gap, it's the fact that the rich only gets richer down here, especially in Asia, because of the connection. Mm-hmm. And also corruption and the systemic injustice. Mm-hmm. So the poor actually do not even come anywhere closer to middle class, especially the very poor. So I'm really trying to educate, especially business people, entrepreneurs who are making it big, which there's a lot of them, to tell them, look, there is a bigger purpose also for you in business, not just to make money. It's not just that single profit thing, but let's look at it as the triple and quadruple profit, the bottom line, which is really looking into equipping your people and then blessing the community through your business, and then how you can actually take what you have in terms of your skills to change can be impacted. And with that, you are actually trying to sort of like bridge the economic disparity, and to have a very conscious ethic that, the profit is not just all about enriching yourself, but it's
okay.
Really for blessing.
So this is back it up just a little bit. That makes sense, and that helps. Mission, our purpose is to address, impact, do something to help successful or maybe, and this is what I'm just hearing right quick, successful business leaders to understand and activate, I don't like that term, but I'm just having to guess, activate their role in closing, reducing the gap between rich and poor in especially developing economies in Asia. So that's what I heard. Okay, now that's not necessarily what you'd write. And you say we will do this by, okay, you know, changing, say vision, or I don't know, basically writing books, casting vision for wealthy people to get it, changing government policy, training, consulting, helping organizations understand the quadruple bottom line, And so that, but having clarity on the purpose from what I just heard would help me understand the need a little bit better. Okay, if that makes sense. And then if you notice, and I know it's a little confusing because that's the same question 4 different ways, and you're answering it 4 different questions, but it's really one question. So what you would do is focus on which question do you care about the most. And let's say that the question you care about the most is what wrong needs to be set right. And so that your answer would be the economic injustice, the gap between the rich and the poor in Asia, is something that we need to address, not only for our region, but for, you know, it hurts the poor and it hurts the rich, both, okay? And so you said in Asia, what's happening is because of this, this, and this, it's getting worse and worse and worse, which it is around the world. U.S. is bad, if not worse. And so in this vein, but these people in these nations are being left behind. And my hope is to create harmony, to create connections, and so that people understand for the first time that there's stewardship. And you might even say something uniquely about the Asian context. And so, Felicia, you know my background, that I spent a lot of time in China in particular, trying to help them to develop what's called the third sector, the nonprofit sector. So I worked for Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker made a quote in the early 90s that said, the greatest thing that can be exported from the United States is the nonprofit sector. And so the Chinese leaders picked that up, and so they and do consulting to help them create a nonprofit sector. And there's all kind of challenges with that, but you understand that. And one of the things we discovered is that in certain Chinese cultures in particular, or areas there, that people feel responsible for their family, but they don't feel responsible for the poor that are outside of their family. It's a whole cultural thing. That in the Hindu system, if somebody's laying on the street and poor and about to die, somebody's going to run over them in a car, and I reach down and I pull them off of the street, off of the curb, and feed them, I'm actually messaging their ability to come back with greater karma, because I am removing them from the dividends of a previous life. Which you can imagine trying to create a nonprofit sector in something that says every time you help somebody, you're actually hurting them, and by removing the circumstances of a previous life. Wow, what a challenge. And so there's certain cultural challenges in Asia. In the United States, we're materialistic, we're greedy, we're sinful, we're selfish, we have expectations far beyond what we should do. We got our own challenges, okay? And I could go on, okay? But in Asia, there's certain kind of some got to address that. The solution is not to make people more like, you know, North Americans. That's not the solution. The solution is a unique solution that works with the Asia honor shame cultures. But that is interesting because you would have stated, here's the need. We have the normal rich, poor injustice that everybody else has. So by the end of the need section, I'm going, wow, what is she going to do? Whoa, you've got me. Now I'm reading. I'm engaged. I want to hear more about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So and I know it's confusing because he asked the same question 4 different ways.
Trying to make it as succinct as possible. That's all I was trying to do.
Just pick one of the questions you like and just, go from there. Okay. So again, this is a draft. This is why we're doing this. So what is your calling? Okay. My calling is to advocate. Very good the way you said that. I love the advocate word. I thought that was kind of fun. For economic and social justice, for human flourishing, to prevail among the least, the vulnerable, and the poor. I know all of those phrases. Okay. Human flourishing is something that is in my environment. Least, the last, and the lost is a Lausanne committee thing. I know that it means a lot to me, this sentence. Not everybody's going to understand the jargon of the sentence. I'm advocating for justice and human flourishing. I know what that means, and it depends on your audience. Not everybody, but that's a whole thing. It is the current word that's being used, and you might want to keep it just because most of the people you're bringing this to probably are aware of it. That is the word du jour for what we're all trying to do. We used to use the word shalom a lot, but nobody really knew what that meant. So that word.
So Dr. Sorry, can I stop you at your tracks there with using those words? Because I am actually working right now in a sector that is very marketplace. And, this was actually a lot of my vision discovery. I actually did it during my MBA time. But at that point of time, there was a lot of just Christian lingo that, the professors were using. So that's how I came out with my own vision. And I understand exactly what is it that I want to do. So as you can see in my initial, if you go further up in the mission. I said I would like to hear wiser. That to me is actually human flourishing. But we use that in our organization because it's sometimes when I write this kind of papers, like in school, I'm not too sure where should I go with my language. Do I just write it in what, or do I still work on the, more of the.
I think when in doubt, use the words that you're going to use with the people you're working with.
Okay.
But recognizing there's even like when we did a lot of work in China, the word harmony was a big word. It's not a word that we use a lot in the Western context, but when it just had a whole range of meanings that I had to listen and understand. And of course, it was coming from Chinese to English.
Yeah.
And I had to recognize, wow, that's a word I need to understand more, pay attention to, and utilize a whole lot more when I'm in China than what I would use in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
But, that's because I was crossing a culture. Here, you're having to cross through cultures inside of Asia. And lovelier is not a word that typically I would use, but that may be a word that's used throughout the marketplace settings in Hong Kong. And so use it. I may not know what it means as much as you do, but
because,
I'm
I
really
work
not
right now in a culture that is very diversified and it's multicultural. It's with Malays, with Indians, with native Malaysians, which are Ibans and Sarawakians. So it's like sometimes I get a little bit confused, like, okay, how
and I don't know the words because I'm not in your culture, but when in doubt, don't write for me or write for Yvonne, write for those people. And we'll trust that you know what those words mean better than we do. And,
okay.
But it's a little hard because you're trying to capture a big idea. And human flourishing is a big idea. That's okay to use it. But just be aware of, you don't want to do something that causes people to stop reading and kind of stop and go, what does that mean? Human flourishing, I think they wouldn't stop. They would go, well, that's an interesting thing if they don't know it. If they do know it, they go, yeah, I know exactly what she said. Just for this big picture justice, which is, especially with an emphasis for those who are least and vulnerable and poor. So you're an advocate for big picture justice, but focusing on people that don't have access. So underserved is the term we use now more often in the United States. I don't think that term is in Asia, so I wouldn't worry about it. But there's going to be different terms that emerge, and they come out every 3 or 4 years. What words make sense to you, even if I'm not getting it across the Pacific Ocean. So what is God calling you to do? This is helpful right here because this tells me what should have been up in your mission statement. These are your primary means. So your purpose is to be an advocate for justice. The primary means you will do that by is teaching, guiding, coaching, and influencing of entrepreneurs, organization, and business leaders to be about transformation. And again, this I felt like in some ways what I read right here was your mission statement. Okay, that kind of makes sense. And it's your purpose. It's your purpose. However, it needs more detail. And so if there's a way this could go up in your mission statement, and then coming down here with the context of your mission statement, you go into more detail about what you're specific, understand the detail, if that makes sense. It's good. But I just felt it's a matter of moving some stuff around a little bit. Rob asked the exact same question 3 different ways, and you're answering the same question 3 different ways, okay? That's Rob's confusion. He does that because he realized different cultures like different questions. You like them all. But pick one of them and then write to that, okay? And so what are you called to do? Impart my gifts to organizations to make it detailed, but I do now understand the context and at least the big picture better. So what are the outcomes? You're talking about a leader's life is changed and workplaces are changed and organizations. So obviously the leaders you work with actually run organizations, and those organizations working with leaders who are business entrepreneurs or business leaders, and you're asking them to change their mindset so that the organization mindset and outcomes are changed. But I had to do a little detective work to get that logic. And so just think about how you would clarify it. And also you could run this by somebody that doesn't know you very well and say, does this make sense? And ask them to be, because I know sometimes in my culture, if I say, would you help me? They would say, yeah, you did this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, this wrong. We're not an honor shame culture. And so we can get criticism, and I feel love because somebody took the time to criticize me. If you could find somebody who is not going to feel that's shaming you by criticizing you, that's helpful to get that criticism, if that makes sense. Because you want to have clarity and say, is this the most clear way I could write this? Is there anything that made you slow down like I'm doing right now and made me have to do detective work? Did it jump out to you and go, wow, I get it, okay? It's in here. It's all in here. It's just a matter of really clarifying it. And some of it is confusing because of Rob's questions, okay? How will you know? Well, no, I did it. Now, what's happening here is you're jumping into your story a little bit. That should come later in your track record. And so what this is just really as short as possible in a white paper. Need, vision, what's going to happen, and how am I going to do it? Okay, what's it going to look like when it's done? How am I going to do it? Here you're starting to tell your story, and there is a place for that, but that's after you've given the logic and people know what you're talking about. Then they want to know more, and so it is good. Just a matter of moving in the right place. So here you're talking about yourself, what you do, what you enjoy doing. I guess what you're trying to do is figure out how to answer that question a little bit. And again, he's asked the question 3 different ways. You've answered it 3 different ways. It's just a matter of honing it down to pick one of them. What are the outcomes? And then writing on that, if that makes sense. And one of the things too is this is a statement of humble and reality. In a white paper, you may not put that in there, although it is in there. That goes at the end, kind of make sure that people understand you're only doing this in dependence upon God. But too much of that in the white paper, people read past it because this is a logical document at this point. Now, stories and videos and all that later that come from that, of course. But you've got a very big vision to address economic injustice in a whole, the largest continent in the world. So, getting that honed and clarified and having a logical statement of what you would do and would not do is going to be a challenge. It's here. It's just a matter of getting it in the right place. So let me stop at that point. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does make a lot of sense to me.
So very exciting. It's big.
So, no, I'm excited because I think I'm getting a lot more clarity. And it's exactly like what you said. I mean, I don't think I've run past this with my PLCs, but they have not, perhaps they have been very kind with me, so it's not like this kind of go direct, be more specific, be more clear, yeah. But this is really good. Thank you.
Anybody else have a comment for Felicia? Something you liked about it, a thought you had in terms of how she could improve it, just an encouraging word, how it impacted you, how it impacted you.
And I want to congratulate you on it. I want for you to be thinking of it in terms of statistics and measurements. Because in order to say that you've done it, then there's got to be some marker that you found at the beginning that you are now going to measure again at the end to say the change has taken place. And the trouble with the measurement of areas like this where you're changing mindset, but you have to work it down to where the mindset leads to actual statistics, right? Because the demonstration of the change has got to be revealed in something, right? So when we actually speak with someone and they agree with us, until we see the impact of that agreement in tangible ways, we really don't know if the bit of transformation has taken place. It always comes down to measurement, to an action, to an output, right? So is it that the businesses will now develop a social intervention that will be a part of their strategy? Will they change their mission and vision to reflect some of that and put it into action? So you're gonna need to measure where it's at and where you're going so that, there's tangible evidence that the change has taken place.
So will I be able to put measurements of like how many lives have been impacted and like numbers of life and how that has changed economically?
Sure. Those are some of the targets you could set based on your idea of the businesses that you're going to be having the intervention with. And maybe those would have to be set in conjunction with. Okay. So as you move towards your final project, you may say there are 4 or 5 businesses that you're going to be focused on, your initial discussions and interviews and research. And that's not for this paper. I'm just asking you to think it through in order to get to how do you know that it's done.
Right, thank you.
So later, when you take this into a business plan or fundraising document, you would say, the first couple of years, I would like to have these, this many businesses that have this many leaders that have gone through it. And as a result of it, we see this, this, and this. So one is the big vision to move the needle, but the other one is you'll have to come up with specific outcomes. And I have found in fundraising, a lot of times I'll come up with what I think are the most realistic outcomes, and then they ask me to do a report. What happened? What'd you do with the money? And when I say I didn't accomplish what I had hoped to, we are 40% less, or whatever. They say, well, thank you for being honest. You still accomplished 60%. But you made an effort at it. And what the respect they said is, you respected us by telling us specifically how you'd be measured and coming back and telling us how you did, even though you didn't make it. That's respect, and here's some more money. Which is nice. But you'll have to take that big picture vision when you get later to fundraising and take it down to measurable impacts, which are more going to be at an organizational level and an individual level, while always pointing to the big vision of changing the gap in Asia. But if you do all of this, the fundraisers, the donors are going to kind of go, I'm excited, but I'm not sure she's got realism about what specifically this money's going to do, and that worries me. But that's down the road.
Okay.
Why don't we move to Melissa, if that's all right. So I'm going to go ahead and share that document. So Melissa, let's see.
Can I give a quick preface that I'm not nearly as far along as Jackie and Felicia and probably everyone else, that this, as you could tell, was completely exploratory, that I don't have a mission and a vision and all that great clarity that it seems everyone else is just sort of doing the word craft. I'm just trying to figure out what that is, so I'm kind of embarrassed now.
No need to be embarrassed at all. So yours was actually fun to read because you're telling a story, okay? And so it's actually enjoyable to read. It's not exactly where we need to go at this point, but you've got a good story and you're a great writer, of course. You're a wonderful writer. And so part of it is the white paper exercise is kind of more of like an outline. And what you've done is told the story, which is often the predecessor before the outline. But you couldn't, if you were in an elevator, you wouldn't get a chance to do all the story. But it has a lot of interplay between who you are, what your calling is. It's a very valuable document. And frankly, it could be used in a friendly environment where you're talking to friends and people that already know you, love you. They would love to hear the way you wrote it, exactly how you wrote it, because it's a narration of the story of what God has revealed in you. For the white paper exercise, we would need to break it back into more of an outline structure. So don't get rid of it. Just see this as step one. So you've always heard the phrase, there's a simplicity after the complexity. How are you going to get to that simplicity unless you write out the story and make it a little complex and let the natural complexity flow, and then you start backing into simplicity, if that makes sense. The white paper exercise is designed to try to find that simplicity after the complexity. So here's what I saw. And again, it's just getting it into the format. And you don't really want to force that until you're ready. But you have made it very clear that you've stated your calling is to help women build capacity to lead change through asset-based leadership development process that equips them to model the agency necessary to transform culture. The only thing that this makes very clear, in terms of clarity of writing, the word model, the phrase model the agency, I know what that means. You're helping them to become agents of transformation. But the phrase model the agency is a little confusing, because agency could be a noun to mean an agency that represents somebody. And this is just you're an editor. So to try to use proactive words, action words to be agents. That's a still to be verb. To change, to transform. To model the agency is just a little bit confusing way of saying it.
It was a little intentional play on words, actually, that very thing, and I call it modeling agency.
Okay. I like that. Makes sense for advertising. Okay. I get that, because people are like, wow, that's interesting. But in terms of stating with clarity, so that would come later in the slogans, that comes later in the branding. That makes a lot of sense. But here you're trying to figure out, you don't want to use a word that has multiple meanings, except in advertising, but in stating your purpose, you try not to do that, because it confuses the reader a little bit. It's a cute play on words. I like that. And I think that makes a lot of sense to your audience. But in terms of clarity, it makes you stop and go, what does that really mean? So I have a friend that talks about the altered heart, that his whole purpose of his organization is to help us come to brokenness and repentance to change our hearts. So, but he uses the phrase altered heart, using altar, like you put something on an altar to sacrifice it, and heart. Well, that's a cute phrase. Great. But people read that, they go, and what he means is our job is to submit our wills, our hearts to dependency on God and for his purposes. But to say altered heart, you stop and you go, did he misspell that? And I understand that that's his slogan and his brand, but until you understand his purpose, then you can understand the slogan. Does that make sense? So, and that's what I'm saying here.
I have two questions, Melissa, just to help me to understand, because when we speak to leading change, what precisely do we want to change? And if we're transforming culture, what aspect of culture are you transforming? So I find that I'm struggling with just the specifics of this because it seems so broad and we can't achieve all. So maybe there is something in your mind that I'm not seeing when I look at this.
I think, Yvonne, we're not hearing you. You're cutting out a little bit. But I think basically what Melissa is saying is she's called to help women build their capacity through a process that starts with what they already have. Asset-based community development, we all know that. Asset-based leadership development, it's easy for us to read that. Now, some of your audience may not understand exactly what you just said there. And when she helps them understand their gifts, build upon their gifts, then they're going to be equipped to transform the culture that they live in, whether that be an organization, a family, a neighborhood, a city, the world. So her job is to help women to empower them to understand their gifts, employ their gifts, and change the area that God has called them to change. That's what I'm hearing. Now, is that accurate, sort of?
Yeah, and I think if you read sort of to the end of the story, that the work that I had been doing on an exploratory basis at the beginning of this year, working with a group of women over the course of 12 weeks in a curriculum that I had, it was sort of a beta test, going, okay, how can we get them from point A to B? And I thought I'd start out with, we're going to do vision boards, or whatever, something like that. And what we ended up doing was taking a whole different track to getting them to issues of identity, like you were saying, and just understanding their own value and worth, and that they do have that in Christ, even the whole concept of agency, which I feel like is a gospel term, and that it looked different for everyone. I mean, one of them felt called to police chaplaincy, another felt called to community development in Peru, or telling she wanted to publish children's books to help spread the message among children of the needs in the world, which, who would have thought that? And I don't know if that's leading change or not. And I think that's one of the things, even in the book, Making of a Leader, kind of his definition of leadership and Christian leadership, which, I felt at one thing, he was, saying, well, this is only for people in full-time Christian ministry. If you're a pastor of a church or the head of a ministry organization, this really doesn't apply to you. But then again, on the other side, he's saying anyone called to lead a group of people in fulfilling God's purposes is leading change, or is a leader. So I guess that's that side where I feel like if I'm helping them, leading them into fulfilling God's purposes for them, right? Then I don't know. I guess I'm, again, exploring.
No, that makes sense. And some of the things, the Bobby Clinton book's a little bit older. The problem is I don't have another book that talks about the stages that lead to convergence. But I agree with it. There's some things in that book that you go, that's a little bit of a bifurcated understanding. And what you're really doing here is you're trying to help help a woman see in her own life what God is prepared to do and give her the confidence to do it. And that's going to be totally different because you're revealing something, helping them to see what God has created. God's created every one of us differently. It's just, some of this is helping it get in a format that somebody that is not, that doesn't give you a lot of time could listen to in order to give you more time. But also when we're asking you to clarify it in a logical format, you may not use the logical format that much in the future because of your audience, but to try to get it in a logical format helps you have clarity. Because once it's kind of in an outline format, then you kind of know how to add the sizzle, the unique words back to it. But the clarity of having to be forced to write it in an outline format gives you more clarity to do it more narrative later with more logic. If that makes sense. But you've got it pretty clear here. It's just in a narrative format, which is nothing wrong. It's just a little bit different. So what you basically said, that you have a real understanding of the need for women to feel affirmed in their callings and to have access to equipping support to fill that. So you've expressed just how powerful that need is and how you felt that. And then you go into a little bit of a story here, which is great in other settings. In a white paper, maybe not exactly. So you're trying to articulate the need in a way that the reader kind of goes, wow, that is a need. And one of the things here that I didn't understand is you were talking about Central African Republic and Boulder, Colorado. At some point, I'm going to have to hear. Obviously, you're saying I'm focused on women. That's at least narrowing 50% of the world's population, or a little bit more actually. Now, is there a focus in the story about the Esther's Closet is down below about Boulder? Is there a particular geographic connection with women, economic connection, sector? That'll need to come out a little bit later in terms of, is there unique needs of women in a particular sector you're called to and you have connections to, if that makes sense. You do have this about the church, that women in the church are even more or less validated because the culture seems to be antagonistic toward them understanding their gifts and calling. And maybe you're saying I want to work primarily with people in Christian subculture, although I didn't see that later at all. Those are all things that we're trying to get in an outline format in a white paper, kind of in our minds before we move down into, okay, so then what results are you going to try to achieve? Mm-hmm. So what's happening is it's here. I'm having to do detective work to find it. And nothing wrong with that. It's an interesting story. You tell stories well, so it's kind of fun. I got drawn into it, but because you're talking about how it happened and how it came out. But you've got it really clear. This is a very customized approach. You want to facilitate. So if we had to write a mission statement, my mission is to help women to understand their gifts and their callings, and to be equipped to accomplish it with the confidence, identity, empowerment, and community to accomplish their calling to change the sector they're influencing or transform their communities. But just clearly we're doing that in a customized way. It's kind of weaving in and out of here. And you really do state the vision, the need very strongly with your own personal emotional connection to that need. It's good. It's just we're trying to get it into the white paper format before you then go back out into the story format.
And then I think part of what I'm, gleaning in terms of Rob Martin and what you presented, the need, I feel like I was just answering the questions, those 3 questions, and I'll start there. But, really, again, focusing on those outcomes, Dr. Yvonne, how do you measure outcomes, intended outcomes? So that to me is challenging.
Yes.
What are the expectations? What does that look like? So,
some of that detail comes later when you're fundraising. That's not yet. You don't have to do that yet. So if you think about it, Melissa, when somebody is a screenwriter, they understand a certain story format. And even though you may not see it, there's a piping, there's something behind it. And so somebody that understands that format, my son is particularly good at this, he can tell the ending before it happens, even in the ones that are trying to break the story format, because he can see foreshadowing, just got a wiring that way. But we know, and every screenwriter is going to think about, who is the protagonist, what is the challenge they're going to face, who's the antagonist, whether it be a person or challenge, what obstacles are they going to come, who's going to be their guide, what is it that the first success they're going to have followed by the next challenge that's even greater than the first challenge, and then what is the climax of them finally overcoming the big challenge with the guide, with the information the guide has given them, the defeat of the antagonist or the challenge, and then the conclusion where it's celebrated. They all have that same format. Now, if they try to get off of that format, which some do, the critics like it, but they don't get money in the box office so much. And so because of that, there is an outline behind a script or a movie or a story or a book. What we're trying to do is help you get to that outline, and then later you're going to add this story, but the story is going to have so much more clarity because it's following an outline of what is the need, what is the problem, what is the vision I have for this, what am I called to do, what would it look like when I have it finished, and then what's my plan for pulling that off. It's in here, it's just not clearly, it's not on the skeleton, the framework that makes it as clear as possible.
Brilliant. I love the hero's journey. I work with that all the time. And as a ghostwriter, that's like the 7 elements of the hero's journey with coaching authors. That was just what you said. That's our main tool. And it's just to hear you say it back to me going, oh, duh, yeah, okay, I'm the mentor. What's the plan? Are you good? So that makes perfect sense to me. I will go back and revisit this in light of the hero's journey. And have you heard of Ken Yonke's Story Lab, where are you familiar with the work of Ken Yonke?
I have, but I haven't participated in it. I've just read about it. Would love to learn more about it.
He does a lot of this kind of same thing. When you're talking about the inciting incident that started you on your journey on the hero's journey in the first place, and then what's the controlling idea? So he has you come up with a good, it's funny that I've been through all this stuff. I've read The Path by Lori Beth Jones and Tom Patterson's book, on life mapping. And I'm like, I've been making this a life study, and it's funny that it's so elusive to me. But I love helping other people do it. But anyway, just, what are those controlling ideas and statements, personal mission statements, and helping other people articulate that in light of that hero's journey. So thank you for mirroring that back to me. I can see clearer now.
So you're not actually using the hero's journey in the white paper. You're using—
No, that's too much story. Yeah.
You're using actually the fundraiser's logic, okay, or the donor's logic. But what's interesting is in a story, you're trying to get them engaged in the story. In this logic, you're trying to get them to understand what it is you're doing, so later they can engage the story, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the hero's journey of the white paper: is what's the need, what's my vision, how will I know if it's been accomplished, what am I going to do, and there's a budget in there for when you're fundraising, and then a little bit about how am I qualified to do that. So think of that as almost exactly like the hero's journey, but let's call it the donors or the calling outline, and knowing that outline lets you then do it in a way in which people can engage it, because you're really doing something different than engaging people in a story. You're trying to help them understand with clarity why you're doing what you're doing and what they can expect from you. And then as a result of it, then they can sign up to be a volunteer, a board member, a donor, whatever it is you're asking them to sign up to do. So,
thank you.
So that's the logic behind the outline. You've got it all in here. It's just I'm having to do detective work to find it.
Well, thank you for helping me pull some of those things out that are really the critical elements. I hear what you're saying, and I think I'm going to go back and nail those down. Thank you.
And you've got them here. One of your purposes is develop a leadership training curriculum for women, facilitating a weekly group. You want to help them with issues of identity, inner healing, vision, finding their unique voice or calling. It's here. I mean, it's just here. It's just a matter of getting it into that outline format and then fleshing it back out after that. And
great.
You've got your own qualifications, which go at the end. You've explained the work of the word agency, but notice here it makes sense. But when I saw it before, I was confused by it. Now you're explaining it, but you want me kind of first to understand your mission, and then you can start adding flesh to it by getting me excited by the way you're using the word agency, rather than it confusing me at the beginning. And, again, like you said, publishing a children's book, that's a great transformational. So if God called her to publish a children's book in order to transform the culture she's supposed to be a part of, that's exactly what she should do. That is transformational agency for her. It's not for me, and it's not for you. But that makes sense. That is transformational agency. You wouldn't want to do anything but that. And you helped her to figure that out. So it's all here. It's just a matter of coming back down to the outline. That's all. That makes sense. It's exciting. So,
thanks so much.
Any comments for Melissa that anybody else would have? Encouragements, challenges, excitements, anybody else jump out and something that you heard?
Although Melissa says she's not clear, I think a lot of clarity comes through in that document.
Yes. Well, thank you. That's good.
I was just going to say, I'm really passionate about empowering women as well. So it's good to see someone else who feels the same way. So kudos to you.
Well, I could see y'all helping each other, actually. There's some common ground. So let's.
I was a little bit encouraged by the format that Melissa used, because when you went through Jackie and Alicia's own, I said, well, I think I didn't do the right thing. But, going through Melissa's own, that is the story format, which is exactly what I did. It makes sense to me now. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Those are good comments. Those are exciting. So it is exciting. So let me go next to, if that's all right, I'd like to go to Guyana. So Florine, I'm going to take a look at yours. Let me share that one. And what, and I know I may not be spending as much time on some as others, but I think as we're doing this, you're all learning, from other people's, examples. And so we will look at everybody's, but I may not spend as much time on all of them, but because I'm going to be repeating some of the things I've said to other folks. So Florine, this is great. Again, here you've got a motto or a slogan that helped me to kind of understand into the context you're talking about. Your mission is to work with parents so that each child achieves his or her potential. That makes sense. But you want to flesh that out a little bit. My purpose, my organization's purpose for Dominion Schools is to work with parents so each child achieves his or her potential. I will do this by, our Dominion Schools will do this by, this, and this. Three primary means or something like that. So just the mission needs a little more fleshing out. You've got the statement of purpose that it does need to have primary means, because a mission statement has a statement of purpose and primary means. In terms of vision, a motto is more of the underlying values behind doing what you do. There's nothing wrong with that. It creates a context. But in terms of a vision, at some point you'd want to state, and we'll go into a little bit later down below, kind of what would be different otherwise. When you're talking about our purpose, if you articulated that, but you notice what's happened here. You've actually stated, let's see, here we go. All of this is need rather than purpose. And again, we're just trying to help you be clear on what you're doing. You intuitively understand, and nobody's going to understand my purpose or my vision unless I understand, if I articulate the problem first. So you've actually done this, you just didn't use the categories of the white paper. And so, Guyana, you talk about the challenge, you've seen the increases of problems, what's happening even in functional literacy, all of that's kind of problem. And Dominion Schools is a school to address that, okay? So that helped me to understand. Now, we're going to get into the white paper later. But it's just, we have to just clarify each bucket needs to have need fleshed out, vision fleshed out, and then and what are we going to do? How would we know if it's being done? When you talk about your story, typically this is good, it's fun to read, but this usually in the white paper goes last, and meaning that once somebody understands the need, the vision, how you're going to measure it, and what you're going to do about it, need, vision, measurements, and then strategy, then it's what shows us that you have the capacity to do it. What is your track record? And again, telling the story is great for somebody that you already knows you and loves you. But for the white paper exercise, we're really trying to get it down to the clarity for people that maybe don't, that once they understand need, vision, how you're going to measure what you're going to do, they say, I'd like to hear more of your story. And again, there's a lot of this is telling us the story of what's happened. And it's great. It's very interesting to read. It's just not exactly what we're trying to do with the white paper. So here, this gave me some more ideas about kind of how you're going to do it. You're going to work with the national curriculum in Guyana and do the national examinations. And now I get back to the parents. What are you going to do? I heard in the story how you did it, but now I'm trying to say, what is it exactly your primary means? Again, it's in here. It's just, it's weaving in and out. And so we're trying to get it down to that kernel of the logic of it. So I know that you are going to help parents to empower children to address these severe needs that are in Guyana. You're going to do that by your story. You're going to do that through the structures of the curriculum and national curriculum and national examinations. But you also are going to do things where you're going to pray with the parents. You're going to teach the parents how they can be better equipped to teach some of the Christian values to the children that you're teaching them in the school. A lot of it, prayer is a huge part of your strategy. But I had to do, again, detective work, because there's so many stories in here, which are good. I don't understand exactly what you're going to do. Here you've got another thing coming out where you've said some of this is going to be some scholarships, co-curricular activities, things that are like, we call them after-school programs that you would empower parents and other people to do. Again, intercessors, prayer is all part of what you're doing. And then emotional and spiritual support for children. It also saw that you were doing that for parents as well. So it's in here, but going back to our format, what I would look for is, what is the need, and try to articulate that in a paragraph or two. What's the vision that would be different in Guyana, or at least the place you're administering in Guyana, if this need was addressed? How would you know the measurements, you would see specific things happening, perhaps in people staying in junior high and high school, parents coming to know Christ, parents articulating their involvement in the children's differently. And then what's your strategy? Prayer, working with the curriculum, working with parents, working with students, and specifically getting them ready to move on to the next level of their education. And then you could say your track record and what's given you the passion to do that. So let me stop at that point. It's in here. It just has to be put into the format that the white paper is. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. And I know this is kind of a funny exercise because most of the time when you're sharing your vision, you're talking to people that know you, that love you, that have seen this. And so telling the story makes sense. However, even with them, if you told the story with that type of a logic, I think they would have a little bit easier handles to understand the stories and engage the stories even more because they now know why it is that you're telling that story and they're excited to hear it in a little bit different way.
Thank you.
And for you in particular, you're having to work in a government system. I think it would also help you because you have trust. Obviously, you've been given a mantle of trust by God with government leaders and business leaders and parents. But if you're trying to change, ask for money, policy change, telling the story of what's happening well at Dominion schools so that the government would say, or other schools would say, we need to do the same, having the logic of the white paper actually would help them to understand better what they need to do to maybe adjust their own school, to adjust government policies. Talking to a parent, using that white paper outline behind your story, I think they would go, okay, now I understand what you're doing and why. And now I'm more engaged and have more ownership because I have more understanding. The stories is what connected them, but the outline gave them a way to hear the stories in a way that they're listening better.
Okay, thank you.
It's a big thing. So the one thing I didn't understand is some scope. You have Dominion schools, and you talked a lot in your stories. How many schools or how many students are you working with?
We have one school.
Okay.
But when we were starting, because there was so much happening in Guyana, our churches started, okay, use it as a model for, so that we thought that we can have a small school and we can do it in another one and in another one, all using the same goal and model. So that's why it's a plural name for one school.
Yes, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. And then, so partly what your calling is to take this model and take it to the next level. But part of the white paper is designed to help people understand that what you're asking them to do, because you're going to have to be recruiting, people to start new schools, for churches to understand, what those schools are doing. And so again, the logic of it would be helpful.
Thank you.
So any comments for? I know many of you have talked to Florine about her vision, and some of you are familiar with the unique challenges in Guyana. Any comments, encouragements, blessings from somebody else in the room? Anybody else that also has a passion for children and schools that connects with this? So.
Yeah, what she's doing is what we were doing in Nigeria with Pastor Dr. Reggie with our schools, and we were blessed to work with Christian Overman, work with RAP, Work-Life Advancement Project, and at a certain point, we were gaining some form of attention, from the government, because working through with our accreditation processes with the government agencies or Ministry of Education, they were kind of interested when the inspectors come around. They were interested that, okay, I mean, what are you guys trying to do? And with our explanation, and we were not deviating from the national curriculum, but we're embedding the RAP project, the Work-Life Advancement Project, into the national curriculum. The children were passing their exam, and the values, that we want to get them, to develop were also being developed. So they were getting interested. So when we were going through our paper, it makes a lot of sense to me, and I could see correlation with what we were doing, and it's still ongoing, back in Nigeria in the schools.
Good.
Thank you.
That's good, and I appreciate the way you created, you made that connection, because you're right on. Christian Overman is a is a person that works with the BGU a lot on worldview, helping people understand kind of perceptions and worldview. So thank you for sharing that. So let me next go to Gia. Let me do sharing here. So hold on. Okay. So Gia, also very well done. Again, it's that narrative format. And at the end, when you're doing this, you may actually use the narrative format, but it's just really making sure it's connected to logic underneath it. That's all. And so it's interesting to read. You're a great writer. The story is fun actually to read and challenging. I do understand some of the things you said. I represent that, and it's a need that I can feel and understand. So the name of the organization is Gift of Truth. And the vision is to transforming lives through transparency and the truth of God's word. Now that's really more of a slogan, okay, as you know. It's a slogan that reflects the vision. And nothing wrong with this slogan, but at some point, and you have it actually in the paper, you've got your vision is actually pretty clearly stated in the rest of the narrative. It just is in different places. And so what you might want to do is pull out those sentences that are vision oriented and put them all together. And that way it helps people to see, okay, this is the vision. This is how because you're very clearly trying to define what health looks like in people. And you've got it in here. It's just, it jumps out. What's not here in this slogan is understanding the depth of the vision for that healthy outcome. Your mission is to equip individuals to live whole, and whole is a big word, fulfilled lives for creating opportunities for inner healing, spiritual development, and self-empowerment. This makes sense. This is a very clear purpose statement. What would help people to understand is a means statement. We will do this by, training, counseling. It just helps people kind of get into the picture of, I see what the purpose is. What part do they do? Do they do reading? Do they do organizational consulting? Do they policy change? No, you do counseling, and you specifically target in particular groups. And so just having a primary